right, good morning, everybody. Great to have everybody here. For those of you joining online, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to the kickoff of June and our first Business Advocacy month. We're pleased today to have the topic of Salem's city budget. Of course, this follows on the heels of the passage of the operating levy, livability levy. We will hear an update from our contract lobbyist, Nicole Palmateer-Hazelbaker, on what's going on at the Oregon State Capitol. Of course, as session intends to wind down, and there is some intent to be done on June 19th, with a possible extension all the way to June 29th. We'll get an update on that. And lastly, we're going to kick off the conversation about what is occurring in downtown Salem with the new parking meters being installed effective in July. Where those dollars are going to be going as the assessment continues to be put on the backs of businesses for a portion of time. And that has caused some confusion amongst some of our members, as there was a thought that once the meters are in, the assessment will go away. We've got a great panel today, and we want to dive right in. Nicole will kick us off with a summary of how we're sitting at legislature.
Yeah, we're there. We have 24 days left of the session. Constitutionally, the session has to conclude by June 29th. Tom is right. They'd like to get out of there sooner. They always do. We'll see. I mean, I don't think they haven't gone till the very last day for quite a while, but it's definitely gearing up. So all of the policy committees have now closed. They're done with their work. So what's left open are revenue, finance, all the joint committees, as well as the rules committee. Joint transportation, the one that started the session to negotiate the transportation package, had given itself a deadline of the end of May. So when the session starts, there's sort of this list of rules that come out that are control what happens during the session. Because they did that because they thought they would have a transportation package, and they didn't. So they had to appoint a new transportation committee, which exists now. It's a direct duplicate of the original one, but it didn't have the deadline. So they're still doing that. We thought we would have seen this package weeks ago, and we still don't. They're still negotiating. They still can't come to a deal. I've seen a memo on it. I'm sitting here looking at it right now. Oh, whoops, where'd it go? We've seen a memo that talks about some of the things they're considering, but they don't have a package because, again, this is going to require some sort of a tax vote. And those are ugly votes that nobody wants to take because somebody somewhere will most likely lose office because of it. That's just how history says it will happen. Some of the things that they are looking at, the funding tools they're considering, and this comes from the co-chairs of the Transportation Committee: gas tax, registration, title fees, road usage charge. And this is my personal favorite: updating the DMV fees to cover the true cost of services. So when we have talked about this before, fees and fines are things that can be passed with a simple majority. However, changes in tax require a supermajority. They're narrowing from what the original package had on it, which was a number of other different mechanisms, but they are trying to figure out what they can do that's going to get the votes that they have to do this. They've also slimmed down what the goals are of it. So, and I was talking last night to Kelly Brooks. She's the governor's transportation policy advisor. And she said, this is just, at least for their perspective, it's not fun. Normally, these Connect Oregon packages are great because it's all new things. Here's all the new things we're going to take back to your district. And this is going to be great, new investments. And this package is not that. As I'm sure you're all aware, a big piece of it is funding things they passed and funded before and didn't get done. But they're either midstream, already started, have to happen. So, but that's not very fun. Nobody likes to hear that I'm going to fund something that was passed in 2017 and we didn't finish it, so now I have to pay for it again. Nobody likes that. A lot of it has to do with maintenance, operation, and preservation. So again, none of this is stuff to write home about. I think everybody who drives anywhere would agree there are things we have to do, but it isn't what they had hoped to. They want to reduce the reliance on the fuel tax to fund state and local transportation systems. And they want to look at how to restructure funding for higher fuel efficiency vehicles and electric vehicles. So the idea that EVs don't pay the gas tax is something that they're very focused on. And that's where you're going to see some of that road usage fee in some form or fashion to try to get at that piece and the increasing use of the EVs. How do then we collect something for that? Again, the conversation on balancing highway cost allocations between light and heavy vehicles, weight mile tax review, and then raising the tax point of diesel. And Ryan had to explain this to me today because I clearly am not an auto person, nor should I be. But how diesel is taxed now. But basically, once you open up statute for anything, any kind of tax, the only reason you do that is to raise it. And diesel has had certainly a more favorable tax rate, and it's been treated in different ways depending upon how it's used. They're opening all of that up here in this conversation. They still want to look at rail transit and pedestrian safety and other components of multimodal transportation and setting the stage. And this is the real question is what can they do and what can't they do around cap and trade? I think they came in about a month ago saying that we're bringing it back, we're ready to talk about it, but it's become too complicated. So what it appears from what we're seeing is they're setting the stage to start going down that road of cap and trade, which is something I'm sure many of you are familiar with that conversation. That's kind of where we are. It is the biggest piece probably right now that everyone's waiting for is what's in it, who will vote for it, what is this conversation going to be? Right after this, when I go back to the Capitol, I'm meeting with Susan McLean, who is one of the transportation co-chairs. So I'm going to be interested what she has to say. Well, other things, if you've been watching the news, Senate Bill 916, unemployment benefits for striking workers. Oregon has passed the most generous package in unemployment benefits for striking workers in the United States. Passed the Senate, it was amended in the House, passed the House yesterday. It took 4 hours of debate, but it passed. It goes back to the Senate for concurrence. In the House, there was an amendment that says during or coming out of a recession, the benefits are limited to 8 weeks. Otherwise, in any other circumstance, unemployment benefits is the same as an individual who is unemployed. It would be the full 26 weeks with a 2-week wait period. The Republicans offered a proposal that would have aligned it with Washington. Washington has a 6-week limitation, but that was not accepted. So Oregon, again, continues our trend of being the first, being right out there with something. And another bill that just recently passed, Senate Bill 426, is wage theft. This bill would make a property owner and general contractor responsible for the failure of subcontractors to pay workers. So for the construction industry, this one's had a lot of concern. There was an amendment that now exempts projects on property used as the owner's principal residence and real property with 5 or fewer residential commercial units in a single tract. But it passed and it's waiting for the governor's signature. But again, I think similarly to Senate Bill 916, what we're seeing is sort of this shift in the balance of power when it comes to, workers, owners, union, non-represented, and that's sort of been the trend this session. I've had questions about the Salem Capital District. That is, the proponents of that, the city have been working on that. It is an end of session game. I think, what I've heard, and I think Tom, you've heard the same thing, is the original ask was, I think, around 6. They're kind of down to about 1-ish, and we'll see. I think that there are a lot of things, I think I give Representative Anderson a lot of credit. He talks about it every minute you talk to him, and he's actively working on this really, really strongly and very loudly and advocating very heavily. But it is indeed one of those things that I don't think we'll know until the very last day when we see that last package that comes out with all of the gimmies, the Christmas tree bill that comes out there. I think that this session it's been a rough one. It has not been friendly to business. I think me and all my other colleagues would all say that together, OBI and other ones. It's been a hard one. When you have a super majority, there isn't a lot of incentive to work across the aisles at all. Now we're getting down to it. Now we're getting down to where it's going to be time to take those revenue votes, and we're getting ready to watch and see what happens with that. But we are starting to see the budgets move. They're starting, once we had the revenue forecast, the budgets are moving now. The DHS budget, which is one of the 2 largest for the state, just came out last night. By and large, though, I have to say the agency didn't get much of what they asked for as far as add-ons, and that's been the consistent message we've received from the co-chairs is they're just continuing to be extremely conservative with funds this year because it was a lower revenue forecast than they expected. Cost of doing the business of the state continues to be higher, and there continues to be an uncertainty for Oregon, particularly around the Medicaid space, on the impact that that may have in the budgets in the future. So that is what I have for the moment.
Let's go to questions from the audience. TJ.
Two issues. There was a farm worker bill that was, I think it was reclassified farm workers. How they get dealt with.
Mhm.
Yes, to the owner. And then also there was a transportation issue, I think, or surrounding diesel trucks are there.
Right.
That issue still.
I believe with the agriculture, you're talking about the ag board. So that one's been deferred for the moment. I think it will come back in 26. They've set it aside and determined a pathway for working to whatever end goal they may be. So if you're interested in that one, I'd pay close attention in the interim because there'll be a lot of conversation. The other bill, which was a wage board for direct care, home care workers, that one's still going, and that one's still very much in the fray. But ag board has been set off to the side for this session. With diesel trucks, there's been different conversations. So there's been one around sort of how the calculation has happened for their usage, weight mile tax. There's all, which is kind of a piece of this transportation package. And that's something that we haven't seen kind of the final version, because what they've done is taken all those kind of individual transportation pieces and put them here into this big bill. And, you know, we don't have that yet. But when we do get it, we'll make sure Tom and Jameson have it as soon as we get it.
Yeah, but on the diesel truck, because they're mandating go electric.
Oh, yeah.
That delay.
Yep.
Was a bill that did not pass. So that started January 1, I believe, that policy.
It didn't delay, but DEQ has now delayed it. So it is in delay. And part of that had to do with actions taken by the federal administration. They just saw that that was going to supersede what happened here in Oregon. It's a delay. It's not, they haven't undone it, but they did it at the agency level because they sort of saw the writing on the wall right here, right now. But the bill itself didn't go.
Chris.
Is there any information on the transient lodging tax?
Oh, that's a big fight. So we keep seeing amendments for that, right, one way and the other way. There's a proposal that would divert some of that transient lodging tax to local jurisdictions for their use, for example, in emergency services or public services. I mean, I know that the Restaurant and Lodging Association is leaning in really, really hard on that. I don't know as much about how the other side is leaning in on, but I can tell you that amendments keep happening over and over. I think I saw 3 different ones come in yesterday. So it's something that's being very heavily in the works and negotiated. We haven't seen who seems to have the upper hand. I think Bill Perry, the lobbyist for Orla, looks really tired, but it's an interesting conversation because I know on public safety side, they've wanted this for a very long time, but they're not the ones we're hearing from as much as just the cities themselves. And that's sort of the other side of the conversation. But a lot of amendments coming in. So that's the sign of a lot of negotiation happening.
Additional questions for Nicole? Awesome.
There's a bill, I think you and I have talked about it before, the manufactured home park limit on rental increase.
Mhm.
Do you know where that one ended up?
I believe it moved.
It did.
I think it did. I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure that one moved forward.
Okay.
Go ahead now. No, okay. I found it interesting. You said this has not been a good bill session for business, and I think we've heard that every consecutive year. Have you heard any strategic game planning from the Republican side on how they intend to become relevant in a supermajority, or is this lost efforts?
I mean, I think that when we're in the building, it's hard. You just, especially with a supermajority, you just don't have the numbers. I think they're doing a really good job of bringing up the issue of forcing votes on things. For example, the wildfire map. The idea of diverting the kicker towards wildfire is hugely controversial, and it appears be clear about that, that they're holding up that wildfire map vote to see if they can force the Republicans to come to the table on the kicker. I think the Republicans are doing a good job of getting that message out there of what's happening, but it's a tough. I mean, labor is very empowered this session, extremely empowered, because they have all the cards are in their hand. I mean, they've got it all. So there isn't a lot of room for it. I think what will be interesting, and I've had this conversation with people, is, how do you communicate that coming out of the session and moving into the campaign cycle? This is the year the governor runs for governor. She'll start running on July 1. We run back into the election cycle. I mean, even though we have the short session, you're basically in it once we get out of here. And I think that is really, I think it's a real inflection point right now, because the R's have lost more seats. So what are they going to do to bring them back? And, I think that I have a big opinion about what they should do, but I think that they are, it is not easy. It's not easy when all the leadership seats and the governor and all of the states, state offices are all one party. It just doesn't allow for good balance. But I do think they're doing a good job of getting the message out there, making sure that people are aware what these votes are and what's happening. But it is, the numbers just aren't in their favor.
The governor's office or the Democratic leadership firmly understood that the businesses that are departing our state due to policy, those are now empty dollars that are not going to be paychecks cut and the like. What is their game plan, knowing the policies they're putting in place are literally causing companies to leave our state?
I think it's a great question. And Ryan and I were talking about this morning. What we see is their strategy is to put as many things in place right now, even though the forecast has said it's declining. Businesses are leaving, jobs are going away. So we're going to put as many things in place as we can. And then, then it's not our problem. The state's on the hook for it to pay for it after that. It's a very, it's like when Rory does this, because she doesn't want to hear what I'm having to say, which is a lot. It is a bit of that perception where labor has really pushed everything on the table this session, and they pushed it right on through, even realizing, and I've had these conversations before with SEIU in particular, where they said it is more important to us to raise the rate, to do all of those things, even if we know people are going to lose their jobs. It's more important to us to get that number up there than it is to keep all the jobs in place. And that is where we are.
It's interesting that Indiana escaped in debt, not just 9 months ago, 1.5 thanks to manufacturing plant in Indiana. 3.4 billion. And that should have been 11.
It is my hope that, as we've watched this, and I think, again, because of technology, we have the ability to communicate amongst ourselves so much better than we did, that idea of kind of rallying around central messages and common goals, particularly for those who are more business friendly, just really becomes job number one here in the interim. I don't think we can afford not to. On that cheery note.
On the Uber, Lyft.
Yes.
Employee, where's that?
Oh God, that's Senate Bill 1166. My life's purpose right now. The one thing that's going to save our bacon on that is that it has a fiscal, because rideshare is new and it deals with independent contractor in a new way. The bill is 35 pages because it doesn't exist in Oregon statute. It has a 2.8 million fiscal from BOLI because of enforcement. Uber alone, which is my client in full disclosure, we have 11,000 drivers in Oregon and we do 8.8 million rides. And our message has been, if you force these companies to leave, which, Uber would like to stay in Oregon, that is our intent and our purpose. Part of our executive leadership at the global level is from Salem, Oregon. It's important that we stay here. But if you force us to leave, the company doesn't live or die by Oregon. Oregon is about 1% or less of Uber's business in the world. It's not, not nothing, but we are trying. That fiscal on the bill is what is saving us. And that's, I think, what's going to drive us, legislators have heard that. They also are hearing that, in a time where you're trying to pass a transportation package, that's 8.8 million rides that you don't have to pay for, that is being provided by an outside. So we are very, very cautiously optimistic. We will go to a work group in the interim, which is what we had agreed to begin with. We said, we're going to sit down, we'll have this conversation. We've done it in other states and we're ready to do that. But what you can't do is just put a bill in front of us and expect us to take it, because at least for Uber as a company, we won't. We will not do that. And I think that rideshare is something that people are used to. They expect it. And, the Portland Chamber has been really good about saying, we want to be, Portland, barely hanging on. We want to be the first city in the country that they really do leave. This is not where we want to be. So we're working really, really hard. The company was here yesterday. We feel that, I feel cautiously optimistic. I never say that too loud. I still have 24 more days, but we're working hard on it.
President Herron.
So I read, I think it was earlier this week or maybe it was last week, a little blurb about ideas around limiting system bills produced.
Yeah.
And so sort of a mechanical deal. Is there any sort of institutional will or consensus on reining in this whole idea of, hey, let's open up with 4,000 bills in the first week?
I would say, having done this for a little while, longer than I think, it isn't that many more than we ever have had. It's kind of the same, and it was Representative McLean from Hillsborough. She's one of the co-chairs of transportation. She said, she said, I want to be able to respond to my constituents when they ask me for something, and no, not everything's going to go. And yeah, some of it's gotten a little out of hand with the placeholders, but no, there's not consensus. And there are Democrats who don't support it as well, which is a little bit of an interesting indicator of sort of how that caucus is working on the House side. I think that the current speaker is perhaps maybe doesn't have as strong of a hold on the caucus as Dan Rayfield has or Tina Kotek did in the past. So no, there's not consensus. And the way the bill is drafted, it certainly favors the majority, of course, but not consensus yet. If I had to make a bet, and this is just Nicole speaking, I would say that this isn't going to be the one they want to fall on the sword on right now when they're trying to finish all these other things and get them out the door.
Just a quick follow-up. So from the outside perspective, it seems like, it's so dysfunctional. Look at all these placeholder bills. From insider perspective, so much ado about nothing. Is it?
I think so. It's really not. I looked in last long session, it was still over 3,000 bills. We learn how to read them, right? And like I use a software program that I subscribe to, and people like OSCPA in the chamber. It manages it for us so that we're able to say, important, not important, and off it goes. And it starts to siphon down pretty fast. After the second deadline, we have just a little over 500 bills left. And that's really what you care about, is those bills that are still going right now. So, if you know how to do it, you know how to do it, and you can kind of figure out. And some of it's helpful. My clients, we file placeholder bills just in case. And that insurance policy, man, it sticks there in our back pocket. It's something we can take out, when we need it. When we need it, we really need it. And I would hate not to have that tool. I'll be surprised if this is the time that it goes. You never know. Last night, I heard somebody said that they're going to throw out some new campaign finance bill and some other things. We're in the last few weeks of session. So, all crazy's on the table right now.
Nicole, okay, Brandon.
Oh, just one quick question for you. So if you look at some of the surprises that kind of the membership basically changed. We all have different industries and we all have our pet bill and watching it on.
Mm-hmm.
But as a broad-based view, is there anything out there that you personally look at, say, the small business community better be aware of this one or two bills?
Right. I think, there is a conversation coming on property tax. I think they're actually really going to put some work into this in the interim. So I think that's going to be a big conversation. There hasn't, due to what they've seen in revenue, there isn't the will to necessarily increase like the personal income tax or things like that right now. I think the property tax issue will be a big one and how they decide to do that. I think continuing to watch in the interim, a lot of bills give the agencies latitude around fees and things like that. So watching that will be a big one because all that's done. And then what happens in rulemaking? And rulemaking can be great if it's in your favor. It can be terrible if it's not. Because once the agency has the latitude and the jurisdiction over whatever piece it is that they're making rule on, it's theirs. And they can have advisory councils, but they are really just that, advisory. And ultimately, it's under the purview of the agency to be able to make that decision. So I think that once the session is over, looking at where there's going to be, for example, the transportation package, there will be some space in there where things are going to be decided within the agency. That will be something to pay attention to. And then I think watching to see, what they're going to tee up, because we file bills for 26 usually around September. It's pretty early. It's not very long from now. So there are some fast conversations coming, and my clients were thinking about that, about what it is that we're going to try to move through. We're starting to see the tax expenditure committee kick up, which is where all the credits are. So, now we're going to start paying really close attention to see which ones are going, or if there's a conversation at all about removing some of those too.
Represent a number of the small mini marts, best markets and the like. What is the status of the flavored e-cigarette bills?
Oh, right.
Uh,
That one I'm
shocked by how much of the sales of our small,
Right.
your corner stores is actually in that market, and the shift of that potentially only into liquor stores has raised up a lot of concern amongst the small tiendas and
I could see that.
markets.
I know there was the conversation, but I'm gonna have to look that one up. That one I can't pull out of my head, but I will, and I'll send it to Jameson.
Yep.
Find out where they
I
went.
can update on that. In closing, Nicole, I would imagine a governor wouldn't want to head into her re-election campaign without at least one win for business in the session. What will Tina Kotek's win for business be this session?
Oh, that's a good question. If I was the governor and I find any type of funding for wildfire, I'll probably take that as the win and they'll extrapolate that to business. But there's not a lot to talk about.
Okay. Nicole, thank you for your expertise, and we know you have to go to the Capitol. Thank you for joining us this morning. Next conversation, we would be in a very different meeting to have CFO Eggleston here as well as City Manager Namburi here. We didn't know where we were going to be sitting on a livability levy. This community came together, although we need to put a very strong caveat on that. We had extremely low voter turnout, and so very active voters were the ones that drove this through in the city of Salem. One, statistically, 4 out of 5 of you did not participate in voting. And we'll all look at the other person and go, that is not possibly me. But when 22% of your electorate turns out to vote, we need to be more active as voters. My grandfathers are turning in their grave, both having served in World War II, to make sure, and like a number of you and your families, we had that right to do. And so voter turnout needs to be something very focused on in our community. That being said, we were able to pass the Salem Livability Levy. And so that provides the ability from our organization standpoint, the priority was keeping public safety in place. With the shocking events at the Union Gospel Mission, even us, we're on the bottle walk. We as staff have had to look at this facility and safety of what could be coming in and out. We have a number of our friends and neighbors on the street that access our restrooms, even though we're a private facility. They tend to not ask, they just use. And so I think as a community, we're at kind of a really interesting tipping point of what's going to be occurring in downtown, some revitalization efforts, but we do know the budget by and large will be affected less, is what I would guess would be the right way to say that, Josh, than it would have been had the livability levy failed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to CFO Eggleston and City Manager Namburi to walk us through the City of Salem budget process.
I'll go ahead and start. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us here. I know we came here in the same room when we started the levy campaign or the presentation. Chamber was the first presentation that we have given on the for the livability levy. So thank you so much for all of your support during the process. I know that was not an easy one. I also know that this is a lot on the community and the constituents, especially in the current economy. So it means a lot that each of you and the chamber endorse this. And I do want to thank Tom for your leadership, your presence at the Salem Reporter Town Hall. That changed the view of the community on the levy quite a bit. So I heard so much about the chamber support on this. For us, as we were kind of orchestrating this behind the scenes, getting endorsement from chamber was a tipping point on this process. And I can't thank you enough to help us through the process and also trusting us with this process. That means a lot to all of us. And it has been a long 3 months, and I wouldn't lie. There's a lot that happened for City of Salem. On the administration side of it, we had some changes. We have a new council, and then the levy and the budget process. So it hasn't been. I have to say that it was just kind of a roller coaster ride for all of us. But as I was kind of reflecting about it, that's something that I personally have to do on a daily basis. Like, okay, where are we at? How are we going to move forward? There are lessons learned, and there are pieces that I'm extremely proud of. That the first one that I want to talk about is this is and I said this in my comments last week. This is kind of like a case study that we can use as we move forward in addressing some of the critical issues in City of Salem. This is like it really showed the power of coming together on an issue. There were definitely disagreements, different opinions, and different thought process about how we can move forward. But there was a common goal that we were all kind of trying to move towards, which is the community has been very clear that public safety is number one priority. We also knew that the proactive services were important. So the budget process where we did present community public safety as a priority, right? So working towards that common goal of wanting to create a better future for Salem and how different stakeholders came together. The most important part of it was the result when you listen to your community, when you engage your community. And part of that is partnering with, Salem Chamber is one of them, and we have partnered with other agencies too. So it kind of really shows what we can do when we collectively can work towards a common goal. The second piece of it is, and which is something that it really bothers me personally, so I'm just going to say it. The reactive way of managing city services is not where we want to be in. The past 3 months, it was all of that, right? So we had, I don't want Salem to be in this situation again. We had levy on the ballot, 37 jobs and the library services and the parks, especially the parks services and at risk. And then we did not even know until like May 21st whether we were going to move forward with these services or not. And then there is also a risk for public safety for next year. Even though we could preserve it for 1 year, we knew that we were going to make reductions next year if this levy didn't pass. A very difficult and a horrible situation to be in. And that's a reactive way of managing services. And I don't want us ever to be in the situation again. So that's something that is kind of really and for all of us, we have been thinking about it from the leadership team and the council. So that's kind of the second piece that we just have to remember that every day, that, hey, we don't want to go back to how we were. The other piece of it is we implemented, I don't think it was a planned one, but we were talking about revenues, we were talking about efficiencies and cost savings, and we wanted to be in this, like we're calling it REC, which is we have to continue to look for revenue opportunities, not necessarily going back to the community every single time we are in deficit or we have issues. So that's kind of something that we have to be creative about what those revenues are. Efficiencies is something that we have to be kind of part of our DNA. And the cost savings is, even though the levy passed, we still have the cost saving measures in place. So to me, I'm still looking at the deficit in the future. Let's do whatever we can do to be very effective in how we manage the public dollars so that we are not in this situation again. So that's, to me, is the combination of revenue efficiency and cost savings is how we need to be, as an organization. That has to be part of our DNA. And I'm hoping that we continue to do that. The other piece that I don't want to miss, but the staff, the past 3 months, and I know it's kind of helps that we like each other and we love working with each other, but it has been a lot. Like, everybody has done their part, and the commitment and the dedication they have wanting to serve this community in a different, wanting to improve the services. I appreciate that, and I want to kind of acknowledge. So finally, I did say this in my comments last week. I truly believe that this levy gave us a lifeline. And what's important is what we do with it, how we plan, how we engage the community, how we execute, determines the future for Salem, how strong Salem could be. So I don't want us to be complacent about where we are at. We have a lot of work to do, but part of that is also be engaging with our partners and listening to what they're saying, and then making sure that we are reimagining our services. I think that's an important piece. The one piece that I do want to touch, like, we have so many problems and so many issues. Often what we do is we bring a solution to a problem, solution to a problem, solution to a problem. In my opinion, that is not the most effective way to manage anything. I would look for us and the council to look at what is the general theme that we are listening to. Let's figure out solution or solutions that could be addressing multiple problems. So what that means, that we have to engage different parties and not assume that we know what solution is going to fix the problem. I think that's where the community has to come in. So with that, I want to hand it over to Josh. He's going to cover our budget forecast, and then I'll add more pieces to it after he's done.
Thank you, Krishna. Some slides up here in a second. So sorry, this is small. So this is actually how our budget is structured. This is the budget committee recommended budget, and we're not done yet. We have a couple next steps they'll talk about here at the end. But the big shift, Krishna just covered it, is the addition of a local option levy fund. So with the ballot language, we have a dedicated special revenue fund created for that local option levy to come in, and then all those three functional programs, parks, library, and Center 50 Plus, are going to live in that local option levy fund, and they come with the program revenues. I walked through it in detail at the budget committee this last week, so if you're interested, feel free and go back and listen to that. That's why, while the revenues for the local option levy, we're expecting about 14 million, you see a little bit more than that there for the revenues coming in. With the total budget of that 781 million across the city's 25 funds. So we focus a lot on the general fund and now this local option levy, but there are a lot of other services the city provides. in those other funds also. This was a revised forecast that we presented on April 16th with the proposed city manager's budget. Highlighted there is the fiscal year 2026. You can see the proposed expenditures, and then the ending fund balance, that fiscal year impact there. We still had a deficit 2.14 million, even after significant proposed reductions to the livability services. So this is the updated forecast that I presented to the budget committee this last week. So just to go back here for a second, you can see anyways, the deficit previous, so was $2 million. Now we're actually, with the cost saving strategies and some of the one-time revenues, adding a little bit of fund balance for fiscal year 2026. One thing we really look at is the council policy compliance. So for a lot of reasons, we have to maintain a fund balance in the general fund. The biggest one being that we don't get property taxes until November. So we have to cash flow operations from July to October with cash that's in the bank. So we have to have that fund balance for cash flow purposes, as well as when we go out for bonds. It plays into our credit rating quite a bit. That structural deficit, so for the revised forecast 2026, adding a little bit of fund balance, and then for the next 4 years, still in a structural deficit, so still have an issue to solve. But I'm pleased to show some green down there in the bottom, the council policy compliance. So you can see for 3 years, we're still within the policy compliance. That's what Krishna was talking about. That gives us time to be proactive to solve fiscal years 29 and 30 in the next year ahead of time, and not having this reactive crisis mode where you're proposing to reduce services at the same time you're talking about revenues. We can work now to solve that problem. This just highlights the difference. So when the city presented on the levy, we talked about how it would preserve and prioritize public safety in the general fund. So this shows the difference between that forecast presented in April 16th and updated with the levy. So what this shows is additional dollars that can be dedicated to public safety. So we're not looking at any reductions to public safety, maintaining the current service level for police and fire. And with that more positive picture, we have time to solve the fiscal year 29 and 30 issues. The local option levy fund, I want to talk about this just for a minute. So with the ballot language, there is an oversight committee that will be formed. We're in conversations about what that looks like. The mayor will likely appoint the members to that committee. They'll review the expenditures, they'll review the proposed budget, the forecast for this fund to ensure compliance with the ballot language. We're also going to have an external third-party financial audit just for compliance with that ballot language. So a lot of eyes will be on this fund. This is the preliminary forecast for that picture. If you go back to the conversations that we had early this year with this fund, council chose the lower rate. We were looking at a few different rates for that local option levy. So it is pretty tight with that fund and funding the services. But right now, I think we're going to be okay. In November, we'll actually see what receipts come in from that local option levy, what's happened with property taxes, if there's any issues with additional compression. We accounted for quite a bit of compression with the 98 cents, but you never know what can shift around. But for right now, the local option levy fund forecast looks good, stays positive for 5 years. The budget next steps. So this is the important piece, right? So the budget committee added back those services, added the tax levy, added the new fund. It still has to go through the city council. So Councilor Matthews and his and the rest of the council gets to see the posse. The posse, okay, yeah. They're holding a public hearing on June 9th to hear the recommended fiscal year 2026 budget. That's where all the changes might happen. That's where we'd like all the changes to happen. And then we come back with a budget resolution on June 23rd to adopt the budget. And I do want to plug here that with our relocation and the seismic retrofit, the city council meetings are in Laux Auditorium at the Salem Public Library beginning June 9th. So if you show up to council chambers, there won't be anyone there. Happy to answer any questions, or Shane, if you want to add anything.
I mean, I'm mostly just here as eye candy when it comes to the budget, but I think a few things I'll double down on. I have a couple things to talk about as well, but just kind of on what Interim City Manager Namburi had said and what Eggleston said. One of the things that have to be so hard as a staff member in the city is every 2 years you have a new council of people coming on, right? A new people with new priorities, new people with new ideas, and that has to be such a struggle. And so obviously I want to commend both of these two, but also just the rest of the city staff, because as kind of this new council has kind of gone into our priorities and what's important to us, things that the city have been working on for an extended period of time are getting shifted, right? And that's got to be really, really challenging to know that you've just spent a year or 2 or 3 of your time spending working on something as we're shifting in the very 11th hour. And so props to the city, because they took on this weight of knowing that we were in a deficit, knowing that if something had to be done, take on the weight of the levy, and have taken on the weight of having a new council all at the same time. And that was a big lift. And so they've done a great job. So that's the first thing I'd probably say. Second thing is, I mean, there's no doubt that the levy has absolutely helped with the forecasting and with the budget and taking some of the pressure off. And I think it's great that the city manager, she has a more futuristic look at this, where it's not about, okay, great, we got this solved. Now let's add in the things that we want, right? Now let's get all the things that we lost, or let's get all the things that we need for the city, because there are things we need. There are things that we're missing. And it's more of a focus of that we can't stop here. So we know that in a few years we have an additional deficit. And so we need to make sure we're prioritizing the efficiencies. We need to make sure we're prioritizing the things we can do that aren't always just going back to the voters. Make sure that we've done everything in our power to make some changes. And even in the 11th hour there, as we were coming down to the end, since she took her role, you saw a major change even in our projected deficit. So yeah, great job to staff. So I have other things to say, but that's it about the budget.
Topics,
Yeah.
but let's stay on the city budget and allow our.
So if I may, so Josh, if you can go back to the current 5-year forecast, and while you're bringing it up, I'll talk a little bit about it. So when we met, so for us, I'm not just talking about myself, for the leadership team, it's important that as we are that we are very transparent about how we are doing business. When we come out and say, hey, this is kind of the reasons why we're doing it, I want us to be accountable, and I want us to follow through what we have promised the community. Now, so the structure that the 5-year forecast, what we talked about in the same room in March was, this is a framework. So if you look at the new one, Josh, so this gives us a framework where you're not competing, nothing against splash pads. I'm just using that as an example, but splash pads versus police officers, right? That's how the structure was before. And even for the council, it is not easy to prioritize when you have a group of people that want those services, and then you have public safety needs. But this framework allows you to separate it. Both are important. There is a dedicated fund to community services. The council can prioritize within that how they want to adjust those dollar amount. And then now this is going to be with the general fund, majority of it is going to be on public safety. So here you are again, prioritizing within that on the same playing field. So it kind of gives you a framework to move forward. What I want to kind of say that what happened at UGM on Sunday night was devastating, right? It was a tragedy. And I think everybody was still digesting like what happened, even for our police officers and firefighters to deal with something like that. But I think that also tells us a story. This is, there are so many, the safety in downtown has been an issue for many years. And last year we, took away those bike cops from our services, and that didn't help with the situation. I think where we are at and where I find it very promising as we move forward, the piece that with the 3 point, sorry, I can't see the exact number, but the deficit in 2029, and we already started talking about it probably like 10 days or a week after the levy passed. And we said, like, we're going to address that. And my hope is through the efficiencies and cost saving measures, right? So, I mean, that's kind of, and I want to work on that right now. So that's why we did not lift the cost saving measures. We said we're going to be in effect so that we can fix that. And part of it is I'm talking about, and I'm hoping the capital district, we get some funding through that, and that helps with that red again. But as far as public safety services, and the council from day one of me being in this position has been very clear to me. The community has been very clear. I said this in budget committee meetings too. Public safety is number 1 priority for this council and for this community. Now, so we have an opportunity, to kind of rethink about how we can do this. The easiest way, probably not the easiest way, but one thing that we could do is to bring back that bike cops back to, and that is up to the council. I don't want to be head of the council. Their job is to tell me what to do. My job is to figure out how to do it. So I'm not the one who sets that policy, but that could be the council direction. But I think what I'm hearing from the council is they do want to have a conversation at like bring a comprehensive solution to some of the issues that we are addressing in downtown. And that conversation has to happen at some point, and I'm not sure what the timeline is, and I don't think we talked about that. But that is definitely in everyone's mind right now, including mine. So that will be our focus right away. So we need to figure out how we're going. Like again, I don't want to do 1 year at a time, one problem at a time. Let's think about how we are going to put a solution that helps the community in a long run, and also addresses the immediate need.
Perspective, we appreciate that. Let's turn over to questions from our audience. Scott, please start us out.
So should we addressing revenue, looking at other ways the city can be creative? I'm looking up there at the summary. I see revenues increase 3% over a 5-year period of time, which hedges inflation. Expenditures rise by 20%. It seems like there's a business in decline, is what it looks like to me on paper. And how do we as a city begin to address the revenue issue outside of tax? With a 20% increase in expenditures, with a decline in business, people leaving our town. It just seems like kind of a flawed model still, I guess.
I dig at least the first section.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one of the things, there's this natural sense to go to a tax, right? That's the natural sense that every, I think, elected body ends up doing. I'm more of a proponent generally of the pay-per-service model things. So if we need to make sure that things that we're doing in a city that have direct consumer interaction have a cost recovery model that are making sure that that's actually paying for that. So I think that's part of where some of those things come in. And honestly, my knowledge, we don't have it fully vetted out at this point where that revenue is going to come from. Those are the sort of things I like better.
Track business. One of the meetings here, was putting over a bit of a proactive attempt to generate significant portions of that budget. I'm not hearing that coming out of the city of Salem. The budget that we want business is welcome. We frankly, it appears to need business at a much higher level than perhaps we are. Is that in the conversation? How are we driving this down?
I get to hear that every day from all of the councilors and the mayor. So that has been back of their mind. And again, it's like 4 months into the council. But that's definitely a conversation. And I think if I remember it correctly, there's one of the work sessions coming up. They do want to focus on that, right? So that is some type of, and we haven't really, I don't think the council had an opportunity to sit together and have that conversation. But that's in everybody's mind, though.
Jackie, then John.
That work. I mean, I know that James and Tom are all up for this, but just communicating to the business community that that's going to talk.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. So I think it's not necessarily, it's just from businesses, I think it was like economic development perspective. So we'll just kind of take a look at that, yeah.
That's better. Miller.
Can you put that 20% growth, the overall expenditures in 2 or 3 primary buckets for us?
So 80% of the general fund is people, so it's all positions. Most of those costs are driven by compensation, so it's a really tight labor market for especially public safety, police and fire. We see employees leaving for other smaller agencies. So it doesn't take much. So if we're not competitive on the market side for those employees, we lose them to smaller agencies with less call volume. Public employee retirement system, PERS, we saw I would call it unprecedented increase that's going to hit here July 1st for 2026. Right now we have fairly conservative estimates actually in the forecast. So I'm hoping the investment returns from the Oregon Investment Council hold true for the PERS fund. And we can maintain those assumptions. We don't see any surprises there. The other thing we're seeing is just like everybody else, benefit costs are increasing. So medical claims, things like that. The city is largely self-insured for some of those things. So we see those costs very directly.
And just to kind of add on to that, I know there were questions about fire overtime in the same room, like when we met before. We do have an audit is scheduled for overtime on the fire. I think it's going to start sometime soon, probably in October is when it is going to start. So the finance committee did recommend an audit for the fire overtime.
They're considering at their meeting in next week.
Next week.
After that, yeah.
And on the PERS issue, does this just keep getting worse and worse? On and on in the horizon, or is there a point which problem starts to subside?
So it's 37 actually. So I've been in my role for about 3 years in finance with the city for about 10. And I attend the PERS board meetings. I'm very involved in that process. I have a counterpart, the CFO from the city of Hillsborough, is on the PERS board. And I meet with her and other CFOs from other cities monthly. So we talk about this often. And we're really at the mercy of the investments. So 70% of the PERS benefits are investments. So it's think of a big endowment sitting there, and investment returns are paying for those benefits. It's balanced by employer contributions. So we have to make up the difference. So if investments come in less than the assumed rate, 6.9%, they just increase the employer rates to compensate. And it's really hard because it hits cities, it hits counties, it hits school districts. School districts get a little advantage because they're part of the state. So the state has some other triggers they can pull there. But right now it's 2037, and there's not very many mechanisms that can really help us at this point. We just got to get to the point where we're more fully funded and we can start bringing down that unfunded liability. There were also some changes recently where our PERS rates, they can't go down until we hit a certain 90% funded status for our unfunded liability. So it really creates challenges for us where if you see an increase, you can't expect it to go down anytime soon.
So the other piece that I do want to add, when we are looking at the costs of doing business, often reactive services do cost more than the proactive way of managing. And even every business, including police, there is a proactive services that you could have in place in order to reduce the cost on the reactive side of it. Unfortunately, where we are at with the city, we are in this reactive mode, and that costs a lot more. So what we are working on, I know Chief Womack is excited to kind of move forward in that path, is to be really looking into what are some of the proactive investments that we can make in public safety in order to reduce the cost on the reactive side of it. And Chief Garbat is already working on some of the things. So anyway, so we are excited to kind of take that shift. I think we need to get into that proactive services and reduce the overall cost of operations.
One other thing we'll say real quick, just on the portfolio side of things you talked about. So one of the things the finance committee is going to be looking at this month, I think it's this month, along with the fire overtime audit and the potential approval of that, is kind of our portfolio performance. And so I think the city has, Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, approximately 500 million or so in overall portfolio investment. A lot of that's in treasury bonds and different things like that, but a portion of that is actually still in the private sector, normal, it's kind of stock investments. And so the council looking at what are our performance in each one of those. And so people in this room are far more knowledgeable about those things than I. And probably most of the people on the council. And so as we're kind of doing that, if there are input, that would be a helpful time for the finance committee to hear that and how we could possibly perform better in those.
Yes, since I probably not probably I am, that I do need to look back at Bob Wells, sit back and Janet Taylor.
I work with them, yeah.
From Atlantic there, and there's a can-do attitude. What are we doing here as a city with all the vacant properties? How come we need gospel mission property? I think it's ironic that you have the city office managing people across the street of this vacant lot that's been there 4 years. So haven't sold it. It'd be cheaper to give that property away to some business than to start paying taxes. Same property down there by Boise Cascade. Well, and another thing too is how come we don't have a view monthly of permits that have been asked? I have this guy here building something. There's a date. Then how long is it sitting there? And then how many people is it going to? How much money is going to be spent to build that thing? And then the people that are going to be living there, what's the ROI? You're talking about the ROI. All we're talking about is expensive. Let's talk about the return on investment. Yes.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, and the union got, I got to put that into the union gospel commission. Why are we so shocked about that? You gotta be kidding. Aren't you watching TV? Hell, it's happening in every state in the nation. Things like this. So, we need to be on guard about that, of course. But the return on investment, and so when you drive through, when I was in my 40s and 50s, there was 70, 80, 90-year-olds, 25, 35 people. Hell, now it's just me and Bob's Hamburger, 101 and 104. I mean, people, we need to be concerned about that. This is the best place to live because we live here. So, but the empty properties and not keeping track of the cities that I know of, for all my friends that moved to, they know where the permits are, what's being built, how long has people been waiting for their permits to come back out, that time.
So Councilor Matthews is very passionate about all the topics that you have covered. So I know he has been actively working on it with the city staff. So.
Well, I mean, honestly, Dick, you're kind of jumping ahead because I had a whole thing presented about this coming up next, but fine. First, we'll talk about the real estate piece. So there was a motion that was brought forward a couple months ago, and it was basically around this whole process of figuring out what property do we own. And so when we started looking into what do we own currently, what are we netting off of those properties right now, it was kind of identified that each department sort of knew what they own, but the city as a whole didn't have a singular real estate portfolio. So as a whole, we didn't know exactly what we owned in totality. and what kind of net we were actually receiving off those properties. So the council put forward a motion to essentially have the city or the staff put a real estate portfolio together that says what we own, what are our current terms on it, what's kind of the assessed value, what's kind of the proposed real market value. And then that way we can have a more robust conversation about the potentials there. And so we don't have it done yet, is my understanding, but I did get an update that it sounds like they've identified 915 parcels covering almost 3,000 acres within Marion and Polk County thus far that the city owns. And so that'll be part of that real estate portfolio that should be coming soon to be able to actually identify what do we own, what are our current terms on it. And to tell you the truth, I'm a real estate broker, just so everyone knows. My number's online in case you're looking for a house. But they as part of that, you know, it's not necessarily only about what can we do with this property as far as a sale. It's also the things that we own. Are we getting good lease revenue off of it, right? That kind of long-term potential, so that it's not just a flash in the pan of one expense, but it's that longer term revenue that we could possibly create. So when we kind of look at revenue potential, that's one of them. The other thing you mentioned was the permits. So that's also been a piece that the staff have been working on. So the goal was back in January, as I was coming on council, to have a dashboard completed where it would essentially be where the city was showing how many permits are out there, what's the average time that it's taking these permits to get through, how many renditions is it taking, kind of this overall holistic view. And that sort of got delayed out to June. And then it got delayed out again to sort of an unknown date. But the city manager kind of saw that and was, this is more of a priority. It's just something we continually hear about. And so she sort of put it on correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but she kind of put it as a top priority. So my understanding is July 1 is kind of the target for when we're hoping to come out with that dashboard, be able to see some of those things. And we've gotten some input from the Home Builders Association and different home builders on what that should look like and what it should entail to try to net out. So yeah, that's the part. I think that dashboard's coming. And then the last thing you mentioned was the UGM, and obviously a tragedy. I think you're not wrong, right? In all of those things that you said, as far as our downtown, and you would kind of mention our downtown we have a violence problem, right? We know we have that across the city. That said, I'll plug this real quick. Right after this at 10 o'clock, there's a prayer service over at UGM. So just if you have a moment to go over there, that'd be a good time to go.
We're going to transition to a downtown topic here in a second, but I have Mark, you were next.
Question about fire department assuming ambulance service.
Oh, you took my question from me.
So my concerns are, you assume that could possibly increase overtime even more, and the issues with possible federal reimbursement that covers the majority of that cost. Is the city prepared to deal with that increased deficit that could occur?
Yeah, so two things. The fire department is prepared to take over. I've been assured, and the council's been assured. So it is a separate fund. So we talk about the general fund a lot. So the ambulance transport is in the emergency medical services fund. It's an enterprise fund. And we've had an analysis from an outside consultant, and I've looked at it pretty thoroughly. Even without that federal reimbursement, the ground emergency medical transport program, it's still solvent. It's not as good as it could be. Right now, we haven't heard anything that would put that GEMT in jeopardy at this point. We're still expecting that to happen. But even without that, it's still solvent in the enterprise fund. And if there's overtime, there's a little bit of overtime kind of built into how they schedule. So we're expecting that. But the majority is going to be planned overtime, not backfilling for other employees, and they're fully staffed up to respond starting July 1st.
Can you give me a dollar amount of how much deficit it could cause out of this contingency fund or this budget line?
For the GEMT?
For assuming this, the ambulance service.
Yeah, we're not expecting any additional deficit from assuming the ambulance service.
You said there's a fund that covers it, but is that fund going to be reduced substantially because
I mean, you guys are all familiar with cash flow, right? So once we start the service, there's going to be a lag in billing, right? So you submit a bill, it takes a while for insurance to pay. So it's going to dip a little bit at first, but then once billing catches up, we're not expecting any deficit for the EMS fund.
Thank you.
Jackie?
In regards to your reference to PERS and how it's not a lot of end in sight and being efficient, when it comes to supporting the business and increasing business because business pays more taxes, has there been more conversation regarding, let's say, maybe not instead of bicycle cops, but you contract out a higher level of security to be present in the downtown area, because that saves the future with PERS and, you know, they have cops on speed act, or the contracting of business to take care of the landscaping instead of paying it PERS. And like, just there's so many areas I'm sure that you this business community. So I just want to bring that up. I'm sure you hear this, but just continuing to brainstorm ideas.
Yeah, go ahead.
So two things. One, yes, we do look at those opportunities where we can look at alternate contracting. One of the big ones is like right-of-way maintenance that we've recently shifted that in the last several years to a private contractor and found that really successful. The other thing is just for the PERS liability, it already exists. So past employees, benefits granted by the state, that liability is out there. So even if you were to say, hey, we're cutting the City of Salem staff in half, it's going to take that liability and put it on fewer employees, and it's going to increase our rate. It's going to double it, you know, to make sure we're still paying that. So it's a little bit of a confusion sometimes where if you privatize a service, it decreases the PERS cost. It doesn't. In fact, PERS employees since 2008 are mostly fully funded. The unfunded liability is on the tier 1, tier 2 employees, but the general service employees, tier 3, are fully funded, and they don't have that liability. They have a lower benefit rate for employees we're hiring now.
Past President Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. Krishna, I was glad to see that you were taking over as city manager. I know that you cut your teeth under Bob and Linda Norris. And so those are two great city managers, and so you've been trained by the best. And I know that you're gonna do good work, and the city council does provide direction, but you are the CEO and you live it every day. Shane's really good at selling houses.
Keep that in mind.
Municipal finance is he's still learning. And so for you too, and I'm grateful that you're in the role that you're in. And I will leave every meeting by reminding people, there's going to be $100 million of private investment in downtown Salem in the next 10 months. That's a great number. It's a great thing to see the private investment coming in.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I have two questions, if I may. Any others from the floor before we transit? Brandon?
Just to go a little bit what Dick said, I'm glad to hear $100 million coming into Salem, TJ, so thanks for stepping up with your bucket. Budget, so we look, I know a couple of years ago, and this just goes back to the expense. Ties into what Dick was talking about, attracting business people to Salem. And I know a couple of years ago, we spent like $1.2 million, I think it was with ServPro or Service Master. After moving some of the homeless, around. Assuming we're still kind of keeping pace with that same expense amount. And that compounds over time. But is there do you guys talk about what are we gonna do with the problem instead of keep moving it around? What services can the city come alongside the county? I know it's a county issue too. Only because, I just recently drove through downtown with a friend of mine that was in to do the Oregon Ducks NCAA baseball. He works for ESPN, and he just turned to me and said, "What is wrong with your city?" And he lives in St. Louis. And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, look at that. Of course, it was down, downtown, under the bridges. And it just hit me again, like a ton of bricks. I'm like, there are some things that we can do to continue to look at not only what are we going to pull in and increase our return on investment, But then it does help with some of the expense side. I know, $1 million or so in your budget's not huge. What do you guys talk about, other than just, hey, we need to work on this? What are some specific things when looking at the budget? Saying we could increase our revenue, make this a much more attractive, safe place. Take a whole bunch of liability off of our police and fire with some of the visits we had in UGM the other day. What do you guys see coming in the next, 2, 3, 4 years that we can walk out of here and say, like this, we like the direction. What help do you need from small business?
I'll go ahead and take that, and maybe Councilor Matthews can add to that. I'm just going to be very honest. The past 3 months has been about that deficit, right? So that's kind of what we were addressing. I do think the council, as they're talking about their priorities, and of course the homelessness is something that I do get to hear about it. But the way we have kind of said, okay, let's kind of get through this, let's stabilize the funding for the general fund, and then we need to start having the conversation. To me, what it really depends on what kind of revenues can we be getting, because everything requires investment. And I know I heard the return on investment is something that has been in my mind. My dad instilled that in me when I was 8 years old. So I'm kind of very big on that. So we need to be kind of looking at that too. When I'm saying return on investment, what services do we put in place so that the businesses can thrive, right? And how do we so basically what it really comes down to now is the time to have that conversation now that the budget is stable, and how to kind of move forward with that. I'm looking forward to working with the council and having those conversations, and we need to do something about it.
I mean, only because she said I would talk, I guess I will. So I would tell you she's 100% right. Like, we've been in such crisis mode over this budget thing. I mean, I've only been doing this since January, but my entire thing has been about budget, really. And so that conversation about what is that next step and how do we solve these other problems, I think anecdotally we all know that that is true, right? We know that even Station 1, it's their anecdotal assessment, right? Is that 50% of their calls go to the homeless population. We don't actually have data on that, is the reality. That's what their assessment is, just individually within their union. And so we know that we have a big gap there where if we were to be able to solve some of that problem, it would have cost savings on the other side. But inevitably, the politics of things come in, because there's not a single council member that you're going to look at that says, you know what, we should have more homeless on the street. We all agree on the baseline situation. We want less homeless on the street. What we disagree on necessarily is exactly what the best way to do that is. And so this council hasn't had a good opportunity to really address that and have a conversation around where everyone's priorities are and where we think that best process. But I'm sure that's coming here in the very near future, just with there's not one of us that didn't run on the idea of reducing homelessness in our communities. And so it would be disingenuous for us not to have that conversation sooner or later. But since this council's come on, it's been fully budget centric.
Switch gears here on a very important topic on downtown housing, but 2 quick updates if we could. Update on Rudy's property downtown.
Can I because we are kind of working with the attorneys on this, and I'm a little hesitant to give any information on that more than, so if I may, I'll just go ahead and send you an email.
I will say I have 3 investor groups waiting and ready. And I know I brought those to the table. We'd love to see some movement on that. Second of all, and maybe more to Councilor Matthews, we have been extremely impressed as a business community partnering with interim city manager Namburi. Could you give us an update? I have many of our people ask me, it's essentially like the city is operating without their true CEO in place. So I have a number of our constituents ask me, Tom, what's the process? When are we going to decide on a city manager? Shane, could you fill us in on what council has discussed and maybe timelines?
I think September is sort of the timeline, and correct me if I'm wrong on either one of you on this, but I think Councilor Nordyke a while back, when interim city manager Namburi was put in place, support a motion because of the budget, because of all the things that were happening to delay that normal decision-making process until September. So I don't think we're really looking at that again, at least not right now, until September to kind of either to make some decision.
Okay. President Rasmussen.
Question on the homeless vein. Mr. Blair was asking about the investment to solve the issue, but does the city have any conversations or any stance in regards to, in 2021, it was then Speaker Kotek passed House Bill 3115, that basically the state decides that you're handicapped and cannot have a no sit lie ordinance, can't be sleeping on the streets. Has there been any discussion about working with other cities, the League of Cities of Association of Counties, to have a discussion about a legal approach to addressing homelessness, and maybe like a downtown district free zone? Has there been any exploration in addressing the homeless issue through eradicating it from our city?
Yeah, so I don't have complete information on this, but I do know that but I heard from the city attorney, Dan Atkinson, the cities are working on something, but I can give you an update on if there are further conversations on it. So I apologize. Have the current information, I guess. So.
Jen.
Can I piggyback on that as a pro on the streets, working with local businesses and investors on this topic for years now? I think absolutely wonderful that our students are going to get some well-needed relief. However, what's the accountability measure on the back end? Like he was speaking to, as a city, we can decide what we will or won't allow to a degree, and why are we not acting on that? Because book and release is going to happen, and just keeps going and going and going. And if I was a police officer, I'd give up after a certain point. Like I wouldn't feel like I was making any movement. So in your forward thinking, accountability measures need to be had with the compassionate side of it, obviously, whether it be health and resources in that sense, but also there has to be where is it okay that I can get a ticket for parking in a yellow, but somebody else can just pull their pants down and walk through downtown in front of a children's facility and it's okay. So those are just kind of my concerns for the city, and seeing it, and our small businesses have been paying the bill on this situation for a while. So I feel like they do have a seat at the table when it comes to these conversations very heavily. It's just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Accountability needs to be in place.
Heard and heard. Let's switch gears real quick to downtown parking. Turn it over to Councilor Matthews.
Oh, well, downtown parking was part of what I was going to talk about, but I'm kind of start with something else here real quick. So, and I'll only start with this because we kind of talked about the permitting piece, and there's one more piece to that also. And so, one of the things we recently approved is the housing strategy plan. And this housing strategy plan, the whole idea behind it, it's required by the state, is that we put forward our strategies and how we're going to increase housing production. And there was a housing needs analysis done a few years back. And in my opinion, there's some fundamental flaws with that, but I'll kind of walk you through them. So the idea is that Salem needs to create about 23,000 units, right? They want to create those. We need to create those units at about 1,200 units per year, right? So that's our burn rate on those 23,000. Where the flaw is that same assessment has also identified that half of those units, so 600 units a year, need to be subsidized. Well, the problem with subsidized housing, right? We don't get any tax revenue back from that. So when we're starting to look at this structural imbalance on our revenue, we're not receiving any type of actual revenue back on subsidized housing. And so for that reason, our strategy is really based around the idea of meeting that analysis and trying to meet that goal. So when we got the 16 strategies, there was a lot of conversation amongst the council initially. There wasn't a lot of love for that strategy. Then it went to the planning commission. It didn't pass the planning commission. They did not approve it. Then it came back to the council, and ultimately with a few edits, we did end up approving it, partially because we kind of had to. The state required we put something forward. But some of the edits we made, I think, will be impactful, at least to the building community that Dick was talking about. And part of that, what the council agreed on, is that what we continue to hear from the development community is that our process is slow. We have zoning codes that are delaying, and we have a process that is just delaying. And if we can't get things through faster through our city staff and through the city permitting process, then housing won't increase no matter what of these 16 strategies you try to do. those are the reasons that the development community feel are having our delays. So whether that's reality or perception, it doesn't matter, right? It has to be solved. Either we need to be able to show that we can be better on this process, or we need to be able to show that we are good in this process so that it meets the need of the development community. And so in order to prioritize that, it was marked as a low priority in the strategy. But the council as a whole went through, did an amendment to the actual motion to approve it, and brought that into a more immediate timeline. So by the end of the year, staff is supposed to go out and have these two things evaluated, which are our current codes and where our gaps are there, where our delays are, and then also our current process. They should be doing focus groups and those sorts of things. How they evaluate that, I'm not honestly sure, but over the next 6 months, that's going to be a big part of conversation, especially for that development community of where are these things that we can improve on. And then in January, staff's supposed to bring that back to council to kind of report back on what those things are. And so just keep that in mind as we're kind of going through on this, how to increase the housing, because that's the state as a whole. And the governor has decided that, and they acknowledge that that is something that we have to do. Let's see here. So downtown parking, obviously that's starting July 10th. It's approximately $1.50 per hour is kind of the proposed. It'll be all the on-street parking, all the actual parking garages will still be free. There's a current parking fee that downtown businesses pay already, right? That's something that the downtown businesses have been taking the burden on to have those parking spots in front of their businesses that be free. This will eventually alleviate that is the intended plan. And so it'll take 12 to 18 months. Josh was kind of talking about that cash flow issue. And this fund is no different. You sort of have to have some funds in there to be able to fund it for that amount of time. And so before the actual revenues from the consumer parking takes over. And so the intention there is that this business fund that would continue to fund that or this business parking fee would continue to fund for an extra 12 to 18 months. So there is kind of a double dip there for a small amount of time. It's just no better way to say it. So that's kind of planned right now. And then after that, it's set to sunset, that downtown business parking fee. I do think there is some conversation around, and this is super preliminary, extremely preliminary, and ultimately if the downtown businesses weren't in support of it, it just wouldn't happen. I think that's really where it probably would be. But I think there is probably going to be some conversation going back to the downtown businesses and saying, obviously there's a need for this bike cops to be back downtown. And previously we had a team of about 8 bike cops, I think, in that area. I don't think that even with that, even if we were to try to find more funding for those 8, it's not going to, we're probably not going to be able to have 8, right? There's just, the cost would just be too high. But I think there will be some conversation going back to the downtown businesses to see if they're open to keeping that parking fee, but transitioning it to a downtown bike cop fee so that it's a pay for service option. So it's a direct link. If at any time in the future, someone wants to cut that bike cop team, you got to cut the fee. The two things are tied together so that you know exactly what you're paying for. And the downtown businesses may not be into it. And this is part of the preliminary conversation I'm even having with you guys. So, but that is part of one of the things I've been thinking about is how do we get that downtown bike team back, or at least a portion of it, and still be able to do it in a fiscally responsible way. And so that's kind of something I think could be coming in the future, is some of the conversation around whether the businesses would support. One other thing I'll put on kind of just your little, just be aware of, one of the revenue, I think, options that are going to be getting talked about and proposed coming forward is going to be an adjustment to the way the city operations fee are done. So currently the city operations fee, when you get your water bill, whether you're a home, whether you're a business, you pay essentially a city operations fee. And I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but it's somewhere around $16 for residential, and it kind of commercial and multifamily are slightly higher. I think there's going to be a proposal coming forward, and I think there'll be a lot of conversation, a lot of debate about it, that buildings over 5,000 square feet would take a heavier burden of that city operations fee. So they would essentially, anyone that had a building over 5,000 square feet would end up paying a tiered city operations fee that was a much higher rate. Obviously, that will affect businesses, right? And so I think there'll be a lot of conversation around what that actually looks like. But keep it in your mind, because I think that's probably coming down the pike here in the near future about conversations and council trying to reach out and figure out exactly what that kind of impact that's going to have.
The temporary structures coming out of COVID that are taking, I believe there's 9 of them downtown that take up anywhere between 8 to 12 parking spots and remain empty by and large until the summer months only. What is the game plan with those structures, and will they be charged $1.50 per hour per day if they keep those in front of their place of business?
You know the answer to that one, Josh?
So it's the dining platform program. I'm not sure if it's proposed for any adjustments. They do pay an annual license or permit fee, but it's something we can look at. It's something I've been concerned about also. We just want to maximize the parking spaces available, both for the revenue, but also just to make sure there's actually somewhere to park.
Yeah, I think it's one of my biggest things I'm trying to. So with the downtown park, I think what we're kind of quite sure on is how much will this reduce parking downtown, or will it not? Right? Are we going to meet the revenue that we're hoping for? Is all our spots downtown still going to be filled like they are now once the paid parking goes in? Or does it shove everyone into the garage and we end up with a whole bunch of vacant parking downtown? And then all of a sudden, any revenue we're getting off of those restaurant actual booths are a benefit. And so I wouldn't want to make a decision too early. I'd want to see exactly what our numbers look like on the parking. If we have good parking downtown and we can utilize those spaces to make more revenue, then I think that's absolutely something we need to. I'm not sure I could make that decision early enough right now until we know what kind of usage we're going to have on those downtown parking spots, the paid parking lots.
June 18th, there's I forget the name of it. I got the message from Derek Gilbert. Mayor Boyd, Council Tigan, both Chief Grove and Chief Womack will be presenting informational session downtown, the Opera House, downtown, and it's about the paid parking situation. It's about all that. And my question is, will that be an informational point for them to put to the business community downtown this idea of keeping the downtown parking tax? And but tying into that.
I don't know. Like I say, I think it's incredibly preliminary. This is something that I think you guys are kind of the first ones that are really hearing about it publicly. And so it's something that I think has been talked about some within council. And it may not, the truth is, it may not net out exactly the way we want. We're still trying to figure out the net revenue we actually get off that parking fee and whether at what positions could it fund? Because it won't fund 8. There's also another thing, and so one of the things the staff just did that I thought really, really smart is they went back and they started looking at some of our classifications of our positions. So like one classification they looked at was our call center for all of our dispatch, right? The WECC dispatch. We had a sworn person, that was a sworn position where in order to be in charge of that call center, you had to be a sworn position. Well, let's be honest, I don't necessarily know how to I don't need to know how to run into a burning building to be able to run a call center, right? And so the city went back and they kind of reallocated that and brought that classification down not to need the sworn aspect, which saved about 80 grand a year on that particular position. And so I think that that's also some of the conversation around that particular team is there a reclassification that might be able to net more with less? Does that make sense?
If I may add, I think that conversation the council still has to have about the downtown safety and it's a broader conversation. So I don't think they had, like the Councilor Matthews said, they haven't had an opportunity to publicly talk about it, and that probably has to result into some kind of a work session or a council meeting topic.
Follow up, June 18th at Salem Main Street. Put that on. It's just a state of the downtown. To invite all the downtown businesses. I mean, right now it's kind of a telephone game where we start talking about the park spheres, extrapolates out to something that doesn't exist. So I'm going to bring in the police, city manager, the mayor, councilor for the area and talk about what's actually happening in downtown.
Smart.
Okay. We are at our time, a little bit after. Thank you, all of you, for hanging tight on this. It is a a very important thing that we do in working with our city and our city councilors each day. I know they're very actively involved. It has been a pleasure working with city manager Namburi and her team. But for a little blast from the past, and the passage of the Livability Levy, I did receive an email from Keith Staley thanking our organization for its support. Keith is doing very well, living in Bend and enjoying retirement life. So with that, let's thank all three of them for joining us today. That we look forward to seeing you next month. Important to note, we will not be on July 3rd. That's the day before 4th of July. We will meet instead on July 10th. Thank you all for being here.